Hi guys, Sarah here and welcome to Novel Expectations. Today I'm coming to you with my very first monthly recommendations video. So I watch a lot of these monthly recommendations videos, and it's actually a Goodreads group. And it was started by, I believe her name is Trina from Between Chapters, and someone else that I'm so sorry I can't remember your name. But I will leave a link in the down bar below to the Goodreads group. So essentially what it is every month they give a category. And we as booktubers can make our own videos giving our recommendations for said category. So for the month of July, the category was empowering females. And I really, really like this idea. So I've actually got 6 that I was able to think up. I thought, okay, I'll make sure I get 5. And then I started listing them and I got to 6 and I'm like, okay, that's enough because I could probably go on forever because I read a lot of chick lit and women's fiction. And in my opinion, lately there's been a lot of great female characters in these books. So let's start off back in the day. And I have to say, Nancy Drew is a fantastic, empowering female, especially to younger girls. These books are fantastic. You know, right from the 1930s when this was written up until modern day when they're still being written. I mean, generations upon generations upon generations of girls have read these books and loved these books. And, you know, fallen in love with Nancy and how wonderful she is. You know, she does her own thing. She doesn't take crap from anybody, you know. She's evolved quite a bit over the years from the character, the Nancy that is in these books, to the ones that I read in the 80s. But yeah, I would have to definitely say Nancy Drew. Another one on the list would be Stephanie Plum from the Janet Ivanovich, the Stephanie Plum series, essentially. They're up to book, I think, 23 now. Started off with One for the Money. I adore this series. Stephanie is fantastic. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the series, it's about a woman who loses her job. She used to sell lingerie, I think, if I remember correctly. Stephanie, she loses her job selling lingerie. Her car gets towed. This is all in the first book. And she pretty much needs to work. So she ends up working for her cousin's bail bond business. So essentially, she's got to make sure people who skip bail get brought in so the bail bond doesn't lose out on the money. And hijinks ensue. This is a fantastic series. She went from literally retail to being like a bounty hunter. And I mean, they're fantastic. She's hysterical. The family is so funny. The books haven't been as good in the newer ones. I haven't gotten that far yet in the series, but my mother has, and she's told me that. But I'm still going to end up reading them when I get there. My mom has a feeling it might be one of those series where it's run its course, and maybe it needs to be ended at some point. But like especially the older books, books like 1 through 5 or 6, absolutely fantastic. Stephanie is a fantastic character. Next on the list is a book I actually just finished. Well, I listened to it on audio, but I still really felt that, you know, an empowering female character, Scout from To Kill a Mockingbird. I really loved listening to this again. I forgot how much I thoroughly enjoyed it in high school, and Scout is adorable. I mean, for the time period that this was written, but also I think it takes place during the 1930s. I mean, for a little girl like Scout to, you know, wear dungarees and climb trees and, you know, not be a typical little girl is empowering for her age. Now, if you went ahead and read Go Set a Watchman, which was set after To Kill a Mockingbird, although I will still argue to people it's not a sequel because it's not a sequel. She wrote it first. It was the what's the word I'm looking for? Rejected manuscript. She went back and wrote this, which I mean, loved the world over. And I know there's been controversy about the release of Go Set a Watchman because, you know, it was her estate that released it and what have you. But I really enjoyed it, and I think it was really interesting to see what her original vision of Jean Louise was and who she grows up to be. And it's wonderful. Like, she really is, for the time period, a woman who owns herself. She doesn't put up with anything. She does what she feels she wants and needs to do, and I think that's absolutely fantastic no matter what time period it is. Stuff. A series that is near and dear to my heart and a character that is near and dear to my heart, and that is Claire Randall Nee Fraser from the Outlander series. This is the latest book in the series, written in my own heart's blood. I did buy this on hardback. I do plan on getting the entire series on hardback, even though I'm listening to them on audio because they're just pretty and I want them on my shelf. And yeah, so Claire, I mean, can you get any more empowering than Claire? For those of you who have read Outlander, I think you know what I'm talking about. Like, even though she's thrust back into the 1700s, she is still doing her own thing, and she will tell him what he can and can't do. Now, in the first book, I know there was a lot of controversy, and I recently watched another booktuber's video on her reasons why she didn't like Outlander, and talking about how Claire was beaten by Jamie in the first book, and the kind of flippant talk about rape and how it's portrayed in the books. But once that first beating took place, which was horrific, don't get me wrong, she stood up to him and said, no, you're not doing this again. And, you know, it was very empowering that even though it was the 1700s, and at that point, not that any man ever has the right to do that to a woman, but it was so much more commonplace. But I mean, it's just what was done. And, you know, he could have done what he did, but he listened to her because he respects her. And she holds a lot of respect in these books. And that's part of the reason I just love her. And she makes her own choices and she makes her own life. And, you know, I adore her. Absolutely adore her. Next up isn't just a single female, but it is a family of females. I was trying to think about some of the women that I want to include in this list, or females that I wanted to include in this list. And one of my favorite series, and I am not usually very big on Regency romance. I find them to be very stuffy and what have you. But the Bridgerton series by Julia Quinn is one of my favorites. Julia Quinn writes Regency unbelievably. She makes it fun. I'm not saying that it's not fun, but like I said, it tends to be a little stuffy and stodgy. But all the females in the Bridgerton family are just wonderful. They all have their own minds. They're not set in, this is the way society is going to dictate the way that we're going to live. They're wonderful. And if you are a fan of romance novels, and you're a fan of Regency romance, please check out this series by Julia Quinn, or anything by Julia Quinn, because she's a wonderful author. The first book in the series, The Duke and I, is one of my absolute favorites. Daphne is just a brilliant character. She decides, along with Simon, who's the hero of the book, to concoct a fake courtship, if you will, to keep their mothers off their backs. I mean, come on. I know it's a trope, and it's probably used quite often, but Julia Quinn writes it so well, and it's made to be so believable with these characters. I just absolutely love them. And last but not least, this one might not be controversial, but I don't know if she'd actually hit the top of a lot of people's lists for an empowering female. But I don't have an actual copy of the book, but I do have, of course, the special edition DVD. Scarlett O'Hara from Gone with the Wind. Like her, dislike her, yes, she was a pain in the ass. Yes, she had a major attitude problem, but you know what? At the end of the day, she did what she wanted to do. And for that time period, for the Civil War time period, that's huge. Women were property. I mean, they talk about the slaves and the freeing of the slaves and how they were property, but women of their families were also quote-unquote property. I mean, the father could decide who she was going to marry. And I mean, she might have her beaux, you know, a woman in general in that time period. But I think it ultimately came down to the family making that decision for her. Like, you can pick from Tom, Dick, or Harry. You know, that kind of thing, right? And they pretty much went from their father's house to their husband's house. Whereas Scarlett did her own thing. She made her own way. You know, she was put in an extremely difficult situation, and she came through it with flying colors. I mean, she survived. Yeah, she was a bitch about it the whole time, but she still survived. And I think that is extremely empowering. And, you know, really, in that aspect, she's a wonderful role model, I think, personally. So anyway, guys, that's my list. What did you guys think about it? Did you agree with any of my list, or do you have any of your own that you want to add? Please post in the comments below. And until my next video, guys, take care and happy reading.